The house had never been loud after she died. It used to be different, warm, messy, alive with small arguments about dinner, school runs, and who forgot to turn off the kitchen light. But after her mother passed away 10-year-old Alina learned what silence really sounded like. It wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, like the air itself was holding grief that no one dared to speak aloud. Her father, Daniel, tried to stay strong for her. He worked longer hours, came home later, and smiled in a way that never quite reached his eyes. But there was one thing he never stopped doing, even in his darkest days. He kept his promise. It had been written on a simple piece of paper the night before her mother's final hospital visit. Alina didn't fully understand it back then. She only remembered her mother's shaky handwriting and her father's trembling voice as he read it aloud. "Everything I've saved for Alina must stay untouched until she turns 18. It is not just money, it is her future. Promise me," her father had promised. And so, a small inheritance fund was created. Not a fortune, not something that changed their lifestyle, but enough to secure Alina's education, her stability, and the quiet dream her mother had always whispered about. She will never struggle the way we did. For years, Daniel never touched it. Even when bills piled up, even when life became tight enough that every purchase felt like a calculation, he refused. That account became sacred, almost like a continuation of his wife's voice, still guiding him from somewhere beyond. Alina grew up knowing about it in fragments, her mother's future fund. Her father called it something she would understand when she was older. Sometimes she would ask questions while sitting on the kitchen floor doing homework. "Am I rich?" Daniel would smile faintly. "Not rich, safe." "What does safe mean?" "It means no matter what happens, you'll have something that belongs only to you." That answer made her feel special, protected, even when she didn't fully understand. But there were other people in the house who understood something different. Her grandparents, they had moved in after the funeral, saying it was temporary, that families should stay together in times of grief. At first they were helpful. Her grandmother cooked meals. Her grandfather fixed broken things around the house. They spoke kindly about Alina's mother, calling her a good daughter-in-law, and they even attended prayers and memorials. But grief has a strange way of changing people when time stretches too long. Months passed, then years, and slowly, temporary turned into permanent. The first shift was subtle. Her grandfather started talking more often about unused money. Her grandmother began commenting on how sad it was for money to sit idle while the house still needed improvement. They didn't mention the inheritance directly, but they didn't have to. Alina's father noticed the way their eyes lingered whenever he checked his bank statements. One evening, while Alina was asleep, Daniel overheard a conversation in the hallway. "It's just sitting there," his father said quietly. "What's the point of locking it away when the child is growing? Families should benefit together." "That's what I keep telling him." His mother replied, "We could improve the house, maybe even get something enjoyable for the girl. She's been through enough sadness already." A pause followed. Then the word that planted the first crack in everything: entertainment. Daniel didn't step in that night. He told himself they were just talking, just grieving in their own way. But something in his chest tightened anyway. Days later, Alina mentioned something that made him stop breathing for a second. "Grandpa said we should make the house more fun," she said, swinging her legs from the sofa. Like a movie room, Daniel forced a smile. Did he now? Yes, he said if we had money sitting somewhere, we should use it to make memories. That night, Daniel opened the inheritance file again. He checked every detail, every restriction, every signature. Everything was still intact, but the feeling in his stomach wasn't. Something was shifting behind his back. The change came slowly after that, too slowly to notice at first. Bank notifications were delayed. Paperwork seemed misplaced. His father volunteered more often to help with financial organization, insisting Daniel was too tired from work. And then one day, Elena came home from school excited. "Daddy," she said, dropping her bag near the door, "Grandma says we might get a home theater soon, like a real one with a big screen and chairs that shake." Daniel froze. "A home theater," he repeated carefully. "Yes, she said it's for family happiness. She said my future money can help everyone be happy now." The words hit him like something breaking inside his ribs. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he knelt down slowly, so he was at her eye level. "Elena," he said gently, "what do you mean your future money?" She tilted her head innocently. "The one you said is safe. Grandma said it's okay to use some of it because I don't need it yet." The room suddenly felt too small. Daniel stood up without another word and walked into his study, closing the door behind him. His hands were shaking as he pulled out the account documents again. He opened his laptop, logged in. Refreshed the page once, twice, and then he saw it. A withdrawal entry, large, recent, authorized. His breath stopped. The signature field showed a name he recognized instantly. His father's. Daniel sat there, staring at the screen as if it might change if he looked long enough. But it didn't. The numbers were real. The transaction was real. The inheritance, his wife's final wish, was no longer untouched. And somewhere in the house, faintly, he could hear laughter. The sound of a new home theater being discussed, built from something that was never theirs to take. By the time Daniel walked out of his study, the house felt different. Not because anything had physically changed, but because something inside him had. The air no longer felt like grief. It felt like violation, like someone had reached into the most sacred part of his life and rearranged it without permission. From the living room, he could hear voices. His mother was speaking excitedly, her tone brighter than it had been in years. "We can install the screen right there," she said, wall, and the seats, oh, the reclining ones with vibration settings. "It will feel like a cinema." His father chuckled. "Elena will love it. She deserves happiness after everything." Daniel stopped in the doorway. Elena was sitting on the carpet, drawing something on paper. When she saw him, she smiled immediately. "Daddy, Grandma says we're going to have movie nights every week." He forced a nod. "That sounds fun." But his eyes weren't on her, they were on them. His parents avoided his gaze for half a second too long. That was enough. He walked into the kitchen instead of confronting them immediately. He needed proof. Not emotion, not anger, proof. But proof had already begun to surface in pieces he had ignored for weeks. Bank alerts that arrived late. Statements that didn't match previous records. A missing authorization email he was certain he should have received. And now this, Elena casually confirming that future money had already been spoken for. When he returned to the living room, his father stood up like nothing was wrong. "You look tired," his father said casually. "Work must be stressing you again. Sit, relax. We were just discussing improvements to the house." Daniel didn't sit. "What improvements?" he asked quietly. His mother smiled too quickly. "Oh, just small things, nothing serious. A little entertainment area for the family. You know how important bonding is." "Bonding?" Daniel repeated. "Yes." His father added, "We used some of the saved funds, not all of it, of course, just a portion. It would have been wasted sitting idle." The room went still. Elena looked up from her drawing. "Daddy, is that bad?" Daniel didn't answer her immediately. His eyes stayed locked on his parents. "You used it," he said slowly, "without telling me." His mother waved a hand dismissively. "We didn't take it. We used it for the family, for her too. She will enjoy it every day. Isn't that what matters?" His father nodded. Money is for living, not locking away. Your wife would have wanted her daughter to be happy. That sentence broke something inside him. Because they had used her name like permission, Daniel stepped forward. My wife wanted her daughter's future protected, not spent on chairs that shake. A flicker of irritation crossed his father's face. Don't exaggerate. It's not like we destroyed everything. We invested in something meaningful. Elena stood up slowly, sensing the tension. Daddy, are you angry? She asked softly. Daniel looked at her and immediately softened his expression. No, he said gently, I'm not angry at you. But when he turned back to his parents, his voice dropped. I need to see the records. His father sighed. Always paperwork with you. Fine, tomorrow I'll show you everything. But Daniel didn't believe him anymore. That night, after everyone went to sleep, Daniel sat alone in the dim light of his study. The house was quieter than usual, but it wasn't peaceful. It felt like something was waiting. He opened every file again, cross-checked dates, compared transaction logs. Slowly, a pattern emerged. This wasn't a single withdrawal. It was staged, multiple smaller transfers, each labeled under vague household improvements, maintenance, and family comfort enhancements, carefully spread out to avoid detection, and every single one traced back to his parents' authorization access. They hadn't just taken money. They had learned how to bypass him. His hands tightened around the edge of the desk. He thought of Elena's mother again. The way she had insisted on protection, not convenience. The way she had trusted him to be the barrier between her daughter and the world's greed. And he had let that barrier weaken without realizing it. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Elena stood in the doorway, holding her blanket. I couldn't sleep, she said. He immediately closed the laptop. Come here. She walked in slowly and climbed onto the chair beside him. She noticed his expression but didn't comment. Are you still thinking about the money? She asked. Daniel hesitated. Yes. Grandma said it's for happy things. She said quietly. She showed me pictures of the theater. It looks like a big spaceship. He almost smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Elena, he said gently, do you understand what that money is? She thought for a moment. It's mine, but for later. Yes, he said, for your future, for school, for your life when you grow up. She nodded slowly. Then she asked the question that made his chest tighten again. But if it's mine, why can other people use it? Daniel didn't answer right away. Because that was the question he himself was struggling with. Sometimes, he said carefully, people convince themselves they are helping even when they're not. She leaned her head against his arm. I don't like loud movies anyway, she whispered. That almost broke him more than the theft. The next morning, his parents acted as if nothing had changed. His mother was already calling contractors. His father was discussing screen sizes and sound systems like it was a normal family project. Daniel watched them quietly from the kitchen table. They were building something with stolen certainty, and worse, they believed they were right. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm. I want full access to every transaction. His father sighed again. We'll go through it together later. No need to make this dramatic. But Daniel stood up. No, he said firmly, now. For the first time there was hesitation, not guilt, fear, and in that silence, Daniel understood something clearly. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about how far they were willing to go, and how much of his daughter's future they thought they could rewrite. And he had just begun to see the full shape of what they had done. The morning after Daniel demanded full access, the house no longer felt like a home. It felt like a battlefield pretending to be normal. His parents moved around the kitchen with forced calm. His mother poured tea like nothing had happened. His father flipped through newspapers with exaggerated focus, avoiding eye contact for longer than necessary. Elena sat quietly at the table, sensing tension but not understanding its shape. Daniel didn't speak much. He didn't need to. He had already decided something irreversible was coming. After breakfast, he stood up. "I want the physical files," he said. His father frowned. "We already told you everything is digital." "No," Daniel replied firmly. "The originals, the paperwork, the trust documents." A pause. His mother gave a nervous laugh. "Why would you need those old things? Everything is handled properly." "That's exactly why I need them," Daniel said. For the first time, his father didn't respond immediately. Something shifted in his expression, just a flicker of uncertainty. "They're stored," his father finally said, "in the storage room." Daniel didn't wait for permission. He walked straight there. The storage room was at the far end of the house, a place no one visited often. It used to belong to Elena's mother. After her death, it became a dumping space for forgotten furniture and sealed boxes labeled with fading handwriting. Daniel switched on the light. Dust floated in the air like suspended memory. He saw the boxes immediately, stacked neatly but untouched until now. He pulled the first one down carefully. On top was a label in his wife's handwriting. "Elena's future, do not open until 18. His throat tightened. He opened it. Inside were documents, legal trust papers, notarized agreements, bank instructions, and a handwritten letter. His wife's voice preserved in ink. He unfolded it slowly. "If you are reading this, Daniel, then I trust you are still protecting her." His hands trembled. "This money is not for comfort. It is for freedom, education, stability. Please do not let anyone convince you otherwise." He had to stop reading for a moment because she had known, not everything but enough to fear what others might do. He opened another folder, and that's when he saw it, transaction authorization forms, recent ones, signed. But the signature wasn't his wife's, and it wasn't his. It was his father's. Daniel stared at the page, the ink almost mocking him in its neatness. There were multiple entries, each one tied to withdrawals labeled as household development or family enhancement allocation. And then he found something worse. A transfer approval chain, his mother's initials, his father's signature, and a forged system override code that bypassed his account alerts. It wasn't careless. It was planned for months, maybe longer. Daniel sat down on the floor of the storage room, the papers spilling around him like evidence of a life he no longer recognized. And then he saw another object tucked beneath the boxes, a book, not a legal file, a journal, his wife's personal notebook. He opened it. The entries weren't about money. They were about fear. "I worry they see Elena as a resource, not a child. I worry Daniel trusts too easily when it comes to family. If something happens to me, I need this protected at all costs." The last entry was dated just weeks before her death. Daniel couldn't breathe properly, because it wasn't just grief anymore. It was confirmation. A soft creak came from behind him. His father stood in the doorway. "So you found them," he said quietly. Daniel didn't look up. "You forged them." A long silence followed. Then his father sighed as if exhausted by inconvenience, not guilt. "It wasn't like that," he said. "We didn't steal anything. We adjusted things. The house needed improvements. The girl needed happiness. Money sitting unused is meaningless." Daniel finally looked at him. "You used her death," he said slowly, "as justification." His father's expression hardened. "Don't make this emotional. You're always too emotional about paperwork." That word, paperwork, felt like an insult to everything in his hands. Daniel stood up. "This is fraud," he said. His father waved it off. "Family disputes aren't fraud." That sentence hit harder than the theft, because it meant they didn't even see boundaries anymore, just entitlement. Footsteps approached. His mother appeared behind his father, arms crossed. "You're blowing this out of proportion," she said sharply. We did what was best for everyone. The theater will bring joy. Elena will remember childhood happiness, not just sadness. Daniel looked at her. Do you think she'll remember chairs, he said quietly, or the fact that her future was taken before she even understood it? For a moment, no one spoke. From the hallway, Elena's small voice broke in. Daddy. All three adults turned. She was standing there holding a folded drawing. I made a picture of the movie room, she said softly, but I changed my mind. Daniel knelt immediately. What did you change? She looked down at the paper. I drew Mom in it too, but she looks sad. A silence heavier than anything before filled the room. Then Elena continued, I think she wouldn't like loud movies if it means people are fighting. Daniel swallowed hard. His parents said nothing, because for the first time, their justification didn't sound noble anymore. It sounded empty. Daniel stood up slowly, holding the documents tightly in his hand. This is going to stop, he said calmly. His father scoffed. You can't undo what's already been decided. But Daniel looked at him directly. I'm not trying to undo it, he said. A pause. I'm going to expose it. And in that moment, something shifted in the room, not loud, not dramatic, just final, because the truth had stopped being hidden in files. It was now standing in the open, and everything they had built from stolen trust was about to collapse under its own weight. The first call Daniel made was not to his parents. It was to his lawyer. His voice was steady in a way it hadn't been for days, but his hands still shook slightly as he placed the phone on speaker. The documents from the storage room lay spread across his desk like a map of Betrayal signatures, forged approvals, and trust papers his wife had written with trembling hope. I need you to review everything, Daniel said, and I need action, not advice. On the other end, the lawyer went silent for a moment as pages were scanned. Then came the response, this isn't just a family misunderstanding. The lawyer said carefully, this is financial fraud, multiple unauthorized withdrawals, forged consent, and misuse of a protected minors trust fund. Daniel closed his eyes. It was real now, not suspicion, not emotion, confirmation. Meanwhile, downstairs, the house continued pretending. His father was still talking about home theater dimensions with a contractor on speakerphone. His mother was showing fabric samples for reclining seats, her excitement almost childlike. Elena sat quietly on the sofa, drawing again, unaware that the world around her was beginning to fracture. But Daniel was no longer part of their illusion. Over the next few days, everything moved quietly, but quickly. The lawyer filed emergency documentation. The bank flagged suspicious activity. The trust account was frozen pending investigation. What had once been family access was now officially under legal scrutiny, and that's when the silence in the house changed. His father noticed first. They froze the account. He said sharply one evening, phone in hand, "Why would they do that?" Daniel looked up from his chair. "Because it's being investigated." His mother laughed nervously. Investigated by who? Daniel didn't answer. Because by then the system had already started responding. Letters arrived, official notices, requests for statements, warnings of legal consequences if funds were misused. The home that once buzzed with plans for luxury slowly became a place of uncertainty. And the home theater project stopped overnight. Contractors stopped calling, deliveries were canceled, deposits were reversed. The family bonding dream collapsed before it ever became real. His parents tried to regain control, but every attempt only revealed more exposure. The forged approvals were traced. The authorization overrides were logged. Even internal bank alerts showed intentional bypassing of Daniel's notification system. It was not an accident. It was coordinated. One evening, his father confronted him directly in the living room. "This is insane," he said angrily. You're destroying your own family over money that was being used for the household. Daniel stood slowly. No, he said quietly. I'm stopping you from destroying my daughter's future. His mother stepped forward, voice shaking. We did it for her. She was sad all the time. We gave her something to enjoy. Daniel looked at her. You took something meant for her adulthood and spent it on your entertainment. A pause, that's not love. That's convenience dressed as generosity. Elena appeared again at the hallway, drawn by raised voices. Daddy, she asked softly. Daniel immediately softened his tone. Go to your room, sweetheart. But she didn't move. Instead, she said something that made the entire room freeze. Is the movie room gone? Silence. No one answered quickly enough. Then Daniel knelt in front of her. There is no movie room, he said gently. There was never supposed to be one. Her eyes lowered slowly. So, it was just a dream. He hesitated, then nodded. Yes. She didn't cry, not immediately. She just looked at her grandparents for a long moment and said quietly, Why would you take my future for a dream that wasn't mine? That question landed heavier than any legal notice, because there was no answer that didn't sound like guilt. Weeks later, the consequences arrived fully. A formal investigation confirmed misuse of a protected inheritance fund belonging to a minor. The bank cooperated. Legal authorities reviewed every transaction. Assets were frozen. Luxury purchases were reversed where possible. And the home theater project became part of the evidence file. An example of misappropriation labeled in cold official language. But for Daniel, revenge was never about destruction. It was about restoration. One afternoon, he sat with Elena at the table. The house was quieter now, not joyful but honest. She looked at him and asked, Are we in trouble? He shook his head. No, we're safe again. What about Grandma and Grandpa? He paused. They're facing consequences, he said carefully, for choices they made. She nodded slowly, then returned to her drawing. After a moment, she said softly, I don't want loud movies anymore. Daniel looked at her. Why not? Because quiet feels better, she said. It feels real. That word stayed with him. Real. Because everything before had been disguised as care, as love, as family improvement. But none of it had been real. Later that night, Daniel received one final message from his lawyer. The case was strong. Restitution was likely. And the truth would remain on record permanently. No more hiding. No more rewriting what had happened. Just accountability. Daniel closed his laptop and sat in silence, not victorious, not celebratory, just still. Because sweet revenge, he realized, didn't always look like watching someone fall. Sometimes it looked like finally making sure they could never take what wasn't theirs again. From the hallway, Elena's soft voice called out once more. Daddy? Yes. Do we still have each other? Daniel stood up immediately and walked to her room, kneeling beside her bed. Always, he said, and this time there was no silence between truth and love.